Imagine never missing. Not sometimes hitting your target. Not usually. Never missing. Every arrow you shoot finds its mark. Every shot is perfect. Every aim is true. That's not normal. That's not even luck. That's a gift from Allah. And that was Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, the greatest archer in Islamic history, the man whose arrows never missed. The man the Prophet Muhammad personally handed arrows to in battle and said, "Shoot. Sa'd, may my mother and father be sacrificed for you." The only companion the Prophet ever said that to, because when Sa'd shot, people died, and when Sa'd prayed, Allah answered. But Sa'd wasn't just a warrior, he was a prayer warrior. The Prophet Muhammad made a special dua for him. He said, "O Allah, answer the prayers of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas," and Allah did. For the rest of Sa'd's life, whenever he made dua, it was answered. The companions knew this. When they had a desperate need, they'd go to Sa'd and say, "Make dua for us," because they knew Allah answers Sa'd. There are stories of Sa'd making dua against someone who insulted him, and that person going blind. Sa'd praying for victory and armies winning. Sa'd asking for guidance and receiving it. His prayers had power, because the Prophet had asked Allah to give them power. This is the story of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, the answered prayer. The greatest archer in Islamic history, the military genius who conquered the Persian Empire, the man whose prayers Allah always accepted, one of the 10 companions promised paradise by name, the maternal uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of cities, the last of the 10 promised paradise to die, a man who lived to see Islam transform from a persecuted minority in Makkah to an empire, stretching across continents, and through it all, through every battle, every victory, every test, Sa'd had 2 weapons, his bow and his dua, and both were deadly accurate. This is part 9 of our series, Men and Women Around the Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon him. We're nearing the end of our journey through the 10 companions promised paradise. We've met caliphs and warriors, martyrs and merchants, the trustworthy and the generous. Now meet the archer, the man who fought with arrows and prayers, who conquered empires and built cities, who lived long enough to see the fruit of everything the Prophet had planted. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was born in Makkah, from the clan of Banu Zuhra. This is important. Banu Zuhra was the Prophet Muhammad's clan on his mother's side. Sa'd and the Prophet were related through their mothers. This made Sa'd the Prophet's maternal uncle, even though Sa'd was actually younger than the Prophet. From his youth, Sa'd showed extraordinary talent in one particular skill, archery. Give him a bow and he could hit anything. His aim was natural, almost supernatural. While other young men were learning trade or poetry, Sa'd was mastering the bow. And in Arabia, where tribal warfare was constant, being a skilled archer meant being valuable. Sa'd was becoming one of the most valuable young men in Makkah. When Abu Bakr al-Siddiq began calling people to Islam, he came to Sa'd. Sa'd was only 17 years old, just a teenager. And when Abu Bakr told him about the Prophet Muhammad, about the message of one God, about Islam, Sa'd accepted immediately. No hesitation, no questions. He heard the truth and recognized it. The sources say Sa'd was the 7th person to accept Islam. Think about that. In all of Makkah, a city of thousands, Sa'd was number 7. One of the very first believers, a 17-year-old archer who would become one of Islam's greatest generals. His life was about to change completely, and he embraced it. But Sa'd's conversion came with a terrible cost. His mother, Hamna, was furious, absolutely furious. She demanded that Sa'd leave Islam immediately. And when he refused, she did something drastic. She went on a hunger strike. She swore by Allah that she would not eat or drink until Sa'd renounced Islam and returned to the religion of their ancestors. This wasn't just any pressure. This was his mother, the woman who gave birth to him, raised him, loved him, and now she was starving herself because of his faith. For days she refused food. Her body grew weak, her face grew pale, and everyone in the family pressured Sa'd. Just say you're leaving Islam. You don't have to mean it. Just save your mother's life. Can you imagine that test? And here's what Sa'd said. He went to his mother, looked at her weakened face, and said, and this is narrated in authentic sources, he said, "O my mother, I love you. But I love Allah and His Messenger more. And even if you had 1,000 souls, and they left your body one by one, I would not leave Islam." Then he said, "So eat if you wish, or don't eat if you wish." His mother stared at him. She realized this boy will not break. This is not a phase. This is real faith. And so after days of refusing food, she finally ate. She didn't accept Islam, but she accepted that Sa'd was Muslim, and Sa'd had passed the test. He'd chosen Allah over his own mother's life. That's the level of faith we're talking about. and Allah revealed verses about this very situation. In Surah Luqman, Allah says, "And we have enjoined upon man concerning his parents. But if they strive with you to make you associate with me that of which you have no knowledge, do not obey them, but accompany them in this world with kindness." Saad's test became guidance for every Muslim who would face the same choice. Love your parents, honor them, be good to them, but if they ask you to leave Islam, to worship other than Allah, you don't obey. Saad had shown the way, and Allah had confirmed it in Revelation. His personal struggle became universal teaching. After passing the test with his mother, Saad continued in Islam. And as the Muslims prepared for the inevitable conflicts with Quraysh, Saad's archery skills became increasingly valuable. The Prophet saw Saad practice one day and was amazed. This wasn't just good archery. This was mastery. The Prophet began giving Saad special attention, recognizing that Allah had given this young man a gift. And in Arabia, where battles were won or lost by archers providing cover for infantry, having the best archer on your side was like having the best weapon. Saad was becoming that weapon, and he knew it. Every day he practiced. Every day he got better, until his accuracy became legendary. When the Muslims were given permission to migrate to Medina, Saad went with them. He left Makkah, the city where his mother lived, the city of his birth, and traveled to Medina. The Prophet made him a brother to a man from the Ansar, and Saad settled into this new Muslim community. But he didn't come to Medina to farm or trade. He came as a warrior, and Medina would need warriors, because Quraysh wasn't going to let the Muslims leave in peace. War was coming, and when it came, Saad would be ready, with his bow, with his faith, and with the prayers that Allah would answer. The Battle of Badr was Saad's first real test as a warrior. 313 Muslims against 1,000 Quraysh. The odds were terrible, but Saad wasn't worried. He had his bow. The Prophet positioned the archers carefully, and Saad was among them. When the battle started, Saad's arrows flew, and every arrow found a target. Quraysh soldiers charging forward would suddenly fall struck by Saad's arrows. He didn't miss. In the chaos of battle, in the dust and noise and fear, Saad's aim was perfect. His arrows were like the hand of Allah, striking down the enemies of Islam. And when the battle ended with a miracle victory for the Muslims, Saad's contribution was undeniable. He had shown what a master archer could do. But it was at the Battle of Uhud that Saad received an honor no other companion ever received. The battle had turned against the Muslims. The Prophet was wounded. Enemies were closing in. And Saad was one of the defenders protecting the Prophet's body. In that desperate moment, the Prophet did something extraordinary. He took arrows from his own quiver and handed them to Saad personally. And as Saad drew the bow, the Prophet said words he never said to anyone else. He said, "Irmi, Saad, Fida-ka wa ummi." Shoot, Saad! May my father and mother be sacrificed for you. This is the highest form of love and honor in Arabic. And the Prophet said it to Saad, while Saad was defending him, while his arrows were saving the Prophet's life. Understand what this means. In Arabic culture, saying, "May my father and mother be sacrificed for you," is the highest expression of value you can give someone. It means you are more valuable than my own parents. And the Prophet Muhammad, whose parents he never knew, because they died when he was young, said this to Saad. And the narrations emphasize this point. He said it only to Saad. No other companion received these words. Not Abu Bakr, not Umar, not Ali, only Saad. Because in that moment, with his arrows, Saad was saving the Prophet's life. And the Prophet wanted Saad to know, your service is recognized. Your sacrifice is valued. Your arrows are blessed. And then the Prophet made another dua for Saad, a dua that would affect Saad for the rest of his life. The Prophet said, "Allahumma astajib li Saad." O Allah, answer the prayers of Saad ibn Abi Waqqas. And Allah answered the Prophet's prayer. From that moment on, for the rest of Saad's life, and Saad would live for more than 50 years after the Prophet's death. Whenever Saad made dua, it was answered. The companions knew this. There are authentic narrations of Saad making dua for things, and those things happening immediately, making dua against people who wronged him, and those people being afflicted, making dua for victory in battle, and victory coming. His prayers had power, because the Prophet had asked Allah to give them power. Battle after battle, Saad was there. The Battle of the Trench, Saad was shooting arrows at the besieging forces. Quiver, Saad provided cover. Every major battle, every significant expedition, Saad and his bow were present. His accuracy never diminished. His courage never wavered. And the Muslims came to rely on him when they needed someone to eliminate a key enemy target. They called Sa'd. When they needed archery cover, they positioned Sa'd. When they needed dua for victory, they asked Sa'd. He became essential, not just a soldier, a strategic asset, the Prophet's blessed warrior, the archer whose arrows and prayers both hit their mark. And like the other companions we've covered, Sa'd was one of the 10 promised paradise. While sitting with his closest companions, the Prophet Muhammad listed them by name. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is in paradise, he said. And for Sa'd, a warrior who had killed enemies, who had seen death, who carried the weight of battle, this was more than comfort. It was assurance. He didn't have to wonder if fighting made him a bad Muslim. He didn't have to question if his arrows were taking him closer to hell or closer to paradise. The Prophet had answered that question. Paradise was guaranteed. Keep fighting, keep shooting, keep praying. Your end is secure. When the Prophet Muhammad died, Sa'd was devastated. This wasn't just his leader. This was his uncle, the man who had blessed his arrows, the man who had made dua for his prayers, the man who had told him, "You are worth my parents." And now he was gone. Sa'd had lost the person who gave his archery meaning, but he hadn't lost the blessings. The Prophet's dua didn't die with the Prophet. Sa'd's prayers would still be answered. His arrows were still blessed. And Islam still needed warriors. Sa'd would have to continue, without the Prophet's voice, but with the Prophet's blessings. After the Prophet's death, Sa'd fought in the Ridda Wars under Abu Bakr, helping to bring apostate tribes back to Islam. And when Umar ibn al-Khattab became caliph, he looked at the Muslim armies and made a strategic decision. Islam had secured Arabia, but there were 2 great empires on its borders. The Byzantine Empire to the north and the Persian Empire to the east. Both were hostile to Islam, both were threats. And Umar decided, we're not going to wait for them to attack us. We're going to take the fight to them. And for the Persian front, Umar needed a supreme commander. Someone brilliant, someone brave, someone blessed. He chose Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. The archer was about to become a general. Umar called Sa'd to Medina and gave him his orders. Take an army to Persia and conquer it. Let that sink in. Persia, the Sasanian Empire, one of the 2 superpowers of the world, an empire that had existed for 400 years, an empire with millions of subjects, professional armies, war elephants, experienced generals, advanced weaponry, and Umar was sending Sa'd, an archer from Makkah, to conquer it. This wasn't a skirmish. This wasn't a raid. This was total war against a superpower, and Sa'd accepted. He gathered his army, he made his preparations, and he prayed. Because if ever there was a time when he needed Allah to answer his dua, it was now. Sa'd led his army toward a place called Qadisiyyah. That's where the Persians were gathering their forces. And as Sa'd's army marched, the reports coming back were terrifying. The Persian army was massive. Some sources say 60,000 soldiers, maybe more. War elephants, heavy cavalry, archers, infantry, the full might of an empire. And Sa'd had maybe 30,000 men, half their number. But Sa'd wasn't relying on numbers. He was relying on Allah. And as his army set up camp at Qadisiyyah, as the Persian forces assembled across the battlefield, Sa'd did what he always did. He prayed, and he trusted that Allah would answer. The Battle of Qadisiyyah lasted 4 days. 4 days of hell. On the first day, the Persians attacked with their war elephants, and the Muslim horses had never seen elephants before. They panicked. They bolted. The Muslim cavalry fell into disorder, and the Persians pushed forward, thinking they would break the Muslim lines. But Sa'd didn't panic. He adapted. He ordered his infantry to focus on the elephants, eyes and trunks the vulnerable spots. He repositioned his cavalry away from the elephants and sent them to flank the Persian infantry. He directed his archers to create covering fire. This wasn't just bravery, this was tactical genius. And slowly, through Sa'd's leadership, the Muslims stabilized. Day 1 ended in stalemate, but they hadn't broken. They were still fighting. Day 4. This was the day everything changed. The sources mention that a fierce wind began blowing toward the Persian lines. Some say it was a sandstorm. The Persians, facing into the wind, couldn't shoot their arrows effectively. Their visibility was cut, and Sa'd saw the opportunity. He ordered a full assault. The Muslim cavalry charged. The infantry pushed forward, and the Persian lines, exhausted after 3 days of fighting, now blinded by wind and sand, began to crack. Their commander was killed in the fighting, and once the commander fell, the Persian army broke. Not a retreat, a rout. The soldiers who had been fighting for 4 days turned and ran, and the Muslims pursued them. The Battle of Qadisiyyah was over. The mighty Persian Empire had lost, and Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, the archer from Makkah, had defeated them. The casualties were enormous on both sides. Thousands of Persians dead, thousands of Muslims dead or wounded. But the Muslims had won, and the impact of this victory was immediate. News spread across the known world. The Persian Empire had been defeated, not raided, not pushed back, defeated. By an Arab Muslim army led by a man who had been a teenager just 20 years earlier. The Persian capital, Qadisiyyah, now lay open. The emperor fled, and the greatest empire in the east began to crumble. All because Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, the man whose prayers Allah answered, had prayed for victory and fought for it, and Allah had given it to him. After Qadisiyyah, Sa'd continued the conquest. He marched on Qadisiyyah, the Persian capital, one of the greatest cities in the world. When the Muslims arrived, many Persians had already fled, and when Sa'd entered the city, his men were stunned. They'd never seen wealth like this. Palaces, treasures, art, architecture beyond anything in Arabia. Some of his soldiers wanted to take everything, but Sa'd stopped them. He reminded them, "We're not looters, we're Muslims. This belongs to Allah, and it will be distributed according to Islamic law." And it was. The treasures of the Persian Empire were catalogued and distributed. A fifth to the state, the rest to the soldiers who had fought. Sa'd conquered an empire, but he did it with justice. But Sa'd didn't just conquer, he built. After securing Iraq, he founded 2 cities, Kufa and Basra. These weren't random camps. They were planned garrison cities where Muslim soldiers and their families could settle, and those cities grew. Kufa became one of the great centers of Islamic scholarship. Basra became a major port and trade hub. Both cities still exist today, 1400 years later. Sa'd built them. His vision created them. Because Sa'd understood, conquering an empire is one thing, building a civilization is another. And Islam needed both, so Sa'd gave both. He broke the Persian Empire, and then he built cities on its ruins, cities where Islam would thrive for centuries. Umar appointed Sa'd as the governor of Iraq, and Sa'd went from being a military commander to being a civil administrator. He had to govern Arabs, Persians, Christians, Zoroastrians, a diverse empire with complex problems. And it was hard. Sa'd was a warrior. He understood battles. He understood strategy. But politics, bureaucracy, competing interests, that was different. And some people complained about him. They sent letters to Umar saying Sa'd was incompetent or unfair. Were the complaints true? Probably not. Sa'd was known for justice. But politics is politics. And Umar, being Umar, investigated. He questioned Sa'd. He questioned the accusers. And in the end, he concluded that Sa'd was doing his job well. But the episode shows, even the greatest warriors face tests in peace. Years later, after Uthman's assassination, the Muslim community split. The first civil war, the fitna, began. Ali on one side, Muawiyah on the other, and every companion was being pressured to choose a side. But Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas chose neither. He stayed home. He refused to fight. And when people came to him and said, "Why aren't you fighting with Ali? Why aren't you fighting with Muawiyah?" Sa'd said, "The Prophet told me there would be a fitna. And he told me the best Muslim in that fitna is the one who sits it out. So I'm sitting it out." And he did. The man who had conquered the Persian Empire wouldn't raise his sword against a single Muslim, because he understood, conquering enemies is jihad, killing believers is disaster. Sa'd lived a very long life. While his companions died one by one, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Talha, Zubair, Abu Ubaidah, Abdur Rahman, Sa'id ibn Zayd, Sa'd kept living. He outlived them all. He became the last of the 10 promised paradise, the last living link to the Prophet Muhammad. Young Muslims would come to him and ask, "What was the Prophet like? What did he say? What did he do?" And Sa'd would tell them, because he remembered. He'd been there. He'd fought beside the Prophet. He'd been blessed by the Prophet, and now in his old age he was the keeper of those memories, the last witness, the final voice of the first generation. And even in his old age, Sa'd's prayers were still being answered. The Prophet's dua for him made 60 or 70 years earlier still had power. People would come to Sa'd and ask, "Make dua for me. Make dua for my sick child. Make dua for my business. Make dua for rain." And Sa'd would pray. And things would happen. The child would recover. The business would succeed. The rain would come. It was documented, witnessed. The companions who knew, Sa'd would say, "If you need something from Allah, ask Sa'd to make dua, because Allah answers him." Even as an old man, Sa'd's prayers carried weight, because the Prophet had asked Allah to accept them, and Allah's promise doesn't expire. In the year 55 after Hijrah, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas fell ill. He was old, some sources say in his 80s, and he knew his time had come. His family gathered around him. Other companions came to visit, and Sa'd was at peace. He'd lived a long life, longer than almost anyone from his generation. He'd been one of the first to accept Islam. He'd fought at Badr, Uhud, the trench. He'd received unique honors from the Prophet. His prayers had been answered for 70 years. He'd conquered the Persian Empire. He'd founded cities, and he'd been promised paradise. His work was done. His end was guaranteed. He was ready to meet Allah and to see the Prophet again. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas died in the year 55 after Hijrah. He was the last of the 10 promised paradise to die, the final survivor of that blessed gathering where the Prophet had guaranteed them heaven. His death marked the end of an era. The last living companion who had fought at Badr was gone. The last man who had heard the Prophet's voice directly was gone. The generation that had transformed the world from Makkah to Medina to Persia to beyond was complete. But what they'd built remained. The cities Sa'd founded, the empire he'd conquered, the faith he'd fought for, the prayers he'd made, all of it continued. Sa'd was gone, but his legacy was eternal. The funeral of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was enormous. Thousands came. The Caliph, Muawiyah, was there. Every senior companion still alive attended, and the younger Muslims came too. People who had never met the Prophet, but who had lived under the Islamic state that men like Sa'd had built. They all came to say goodbye to the last of the 10, to the man whose arrows had never missed and whose prayers had always been answered, to the conqueror of Persia, to the founder of cities, to the living legend. They prayed janazah over him, and they buried him in Baqi Cemetery in Medina, near his brothers, the companions who had died before him. And as they lowered him into the ground, everyone knew an era had ended. But what an era it had been. So what made Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas different? In a generation of extraordinary people, what was his unique contribution? It wasn't just that he was a great archer, though he was the greatest. It wasn't just that his prayers were answered, though they always were. It wasn't just that he conquered an empire, though he did. What made Sa'd unique was the combination. He was a warrior whose weapon was blessed, a general whose prayers had power, a conqueror who built civilization, a man who could fight an empire and refuse to fight a believer. He mastered both the physical and the spiritual, his arrows and his du'as, his battles and his prayers, and both worked together, because Sa'd understood, you need both. You need the bow to defend Islam, and you need the du'a to guide the arrow. He gave both, and he mastered both. Here's what we learn from Sa'd about skill. Master your craft. Sa'd could have been a mediocre archer. He could have been good enough, but he wasn't satisfied with good enough. He practiced until he was the best, until his aim was perfect, until the Prophet personally handed him arrows and said, shoot. Sa'd, because excellence in your craft when used for Allah becomes worship. Sa'd's archery wasn't just a skill, it was his service to Islam. And the lesson for us, whatever you do, whether it's medicine, engineering, art, business, sports, master it, be the best at it. Not for ego, but so that when Islam needs you, you have something excellent to offer. Sa'd shows us skill is a gift from Allah, master it, use it for Him. The second lesson is about prayer. Sa'd's du'as were answered because the Prophet made a special du'a for him. We don't have that. But we have something else. The promise that Allah answers all sincere prayers, even if not always in the way we expect. Sa'd teaches us make du'a with conviction, not with doubt, not with maybe Allah will answer, but with certainty. Ask Allah for what you need. Ask Him for victory. Ask Him for guidance. Ask Him for healing. Ask Him for provision. And trust that He will respond. Maybe not immediately, maybe not the way you want, but He will respond, because Allah says, call upon me, I will respond to you. Sa'd called upon Allah for 70 years, and Allah responded for 70 years. That's the pattern. Ask, trust, receive. If you're young and listening to this, be like Sa'd. Master your skill. Whatever gift Allah has given you, develop it. Perfect it. Become the best at it, and use it for Islam and pray. Make dua with absolute conviction that Allah will answer. Don't doubt. Don't hesitate. Ask Allah for what you need and trust Him to respond. You might not conquer an empire, but you can conquer your field. You can build your city. You can leave your mark, the way Sa'd did, not by being perfect, but by being excellent in what you were given and dedicated to using it for Allah. This completes the story of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. May Allah be pleased with him. This is part 9 of our series. Men and women around the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. We've now covered 9 of the 10 companions promised paradise. Caliphs and warriors, archers and merchants, the trustworthy and the generous. One more remains. One final story. The 10th companion promised paradise. Sa'id ibn Zayd. His story is coming. Stay with us as we complete this journey through the greatest generation that ever lived. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, the answered prayer, the greatest archer in Islamic history, the man whose arrows never missed and whose prayers Allah always accepted, the conqueror of the Persian Empire, the founder of Kufa and Basra, the last of the 10 promised paradise to die, the companion who lived long enough to see Islam transform the world. May his skill inspire us to master our crafts. May his prayers inspire us to make dua with conviction. May his victories inspire us to fight for truth. May his city building inspire us to build lasting legacies. May his wisdom in the fitna inspire us to choose unity over division. And may his life prove to us that when Allah blesses your hands and answers your prayers, nothing is impossible. Until next time, the final episode of this series, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.